Hello there. Boris Johnson has decided to lay down the law on the Brexit negotiations and has effectively brought forward the deadline from December to June. Firstly, as ever, please kick that YouTube algorithm up the jacksie by giving this video a big fat like. And this is my third video today, so please do check the other two out. Now, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has published the UK Brexit trade talks negotiating intentions today in a government document called The Future Relationship with the EU, the UK's Approach to Negotiations. And the real bombshell in it is the statement that the UK will not be extending the implementation period beyond the 31st of December and is committed to working in a speedy and determined fashion to do so, with an appropriate number of negotiating rounds between now and the June high-level meeting foreseen in the political declaration. The government would hope that, by that point, the broad outline of an agreement would be clear and be capable of being rapidly finalised by September. If that does not seem to be the case at the June meeting, the government will need to decide whether the UK's attention should move away from negotiations and focus solely on continuing domestic preparations to exit the transition period in an orderly fashion. So, if in the eyes of the UK government there has been insufficient progress by the time of the mid-year high-level meeting in June, then the UK could decide to just drop the talks and concentrate on making sure the country is ready to deal with the EU on WTO terms by January the 1st next year. On this, the document says, if it is not possible to negotiate a satisfactory outcome, then the trading relationship with the EU will rest on the 2019 withdrawal agreement and will look similar to Australia's. Now, in the political declaration at paragraph 141, it says, following the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the Union, the parties will convene to take stock of progress with the aim of agreeing actions to move forward in negotiations on the future relationship. In particular, the parties will convene at a high level in June 2020 for this purpose. And this meeting was probably the one that Brussels was looking at as the opportunity to argue for an extension to the implementation period for 1 or 2 years as laid out in the Withdrawal Agreement Treaty at Article 132, on the basis that there had been insufficient progress in the talks to complete them on time. But the UK has now turned this on its head and said that instead of foot-dragging and delaying progress until June so that we end up wasting another couple of years to allow Brussels more time to try and tie the UK up in knots, if there's insufficient progress by the June meeting, then let's just stop the process there and then and prepare to go our separate ways at the end of the year. So what the government has done is effectively advanced the implementation period timetable by 6 months and on our terms. So if we think the EU is not pushing hard enough for a deal, then that's it. And this, of course, has not pleased the EU at all. But not only that, after crafting Barnier's negotiating mandate to try and wrap the UK up in ECJ red tape and plunder our resources, the UK's stance on the future relationship from the document published today is a vision of a relationship based on friendly cooperation between sovereign equals, with both parties respecting one another's legal autonomy and right to manage their own resources as they see fit. Whatever happens, the government will not negotiate any arrangement in which the UK does not have control of its own laws and political life. That means that we will not agree to any obligations for our laws to be aligned with the EU's, or for the EU's institutions, including the Court of Justice, to have any jurisdiction in the UK. And on the important litmus test of UK fishing waters, the 30-page document says, the UK is ready to consider an agreement on fisheries that reflects the fact that the UK will be an independent coastal state at the end of 2020. And it goes on to say that any agreement would be in line with precedent for EU fisheries agreements with other independent coastal states, and also that any EU vessels granted access to fish in UK waters in annual negotiations would be required to comply with UK rules and would be subject to licensing requirements, including reporting obligations. But the one that the EU really will not like is Chapter 32, called Managing the Agreement, where it says, the agreement should include provisions for governance arrangements that are appropriate to a relationship of sovereign equals drawn from existing free trade agreements such as those the EU has with Japan and Canada. These should be based on a joint committee to support the smooth functioning of the agreement and provide mechanisms for dialogue and, if necessary, dispute resolution. The arrangements will reflect the regulatory and judicial autonomy of the UK, and accordingly there will be no role for the Court of Justice of the European Union in the dispute resolution mechanism. This is consistent with previous free trade agreements concluded by the EU. Now that is the direct opposite of what the EU is insisting on. And there's nothing in the UK government statement about agreeing to level playing fields either. You can hear the frothing of the Brussels mouth from here. Now I would suspect that many experienced negotiators out there might be looking at the two sides negotiating statements and wondering where the two sides will be prepared to compromise so as to reach a deal. But the language on either side regarding sovereignty over the UK couldn't be further apart. And those on the UK side sound more like red lines than negotiating start points. The UK government wants the UK to be a sovereign country under the sole governance of the UK government and parliament, while the EU wants the UK as a country to be under the sole sovereign governance of the Brussels bureaucrats and its courts. But as usual, the pro-EU establishment in the UK has crawled out from under its rock in the form of Ed Davey, the acting leader of the Liberal Democrats, who said, once again we have seen the PM is more interested in brinkmanship and pleasing the Tory backbenches than in working with the EU to build a sustainable trading partnership. People are tired of the government's posturing. What they want is a well-functioning trading relationship with the EU that protects our jobs and businesses, not more self-imposed deadlines and threats of sabotaging the negotiation. Finalising an agreement by 2021 is already unlikely. Narrowing the timeframe even more is nothing short of reckless. The Liberal Democrats will oppose the government's negotiating stance and fight for the closest possible trading partnership with Europe. The Lib Dems, the party of rejoining the EU, hankering after the good old days of subservience and willing to sign up without scrutiny to absolutely anything their Brussels masters say. How on earth can Ed Davey call what the EU wants a trading partnership? But the rest of us have to be aware that much of these talks will be held behind closed doors, with only chosen snippets being leaked out by both sides as we go along. But the 30th of June, by which time, according to Boris, the talks must be going somewhere productive or we walk, is only 124 days away. So what we don't want to be hearing in those 124 days are rumours of any Boris backsliding. Anyway, if you want to hear more from me, please don't forget to subscribe and also press that little bell, or you won't get any notifications. And if you want to see more of me, buy a mug with my mug on it. So what do you think about all of this? Please share and comment, and thank you for watching.